Hi, hi. Well, it's 9 o'clock and I promised to be online. If you're joining us, won't you put your name down in the chat box over there and where you're joining us from so I can see who's joining us? I just put a notice out on Instagram that I was going live, so hopefully everyone over there gets that. But I did actually put out a post today saying that I was doing part 2 of my Italian story. Last week, I wrote about my arrival in Italy and what led up to me coming to Italy. I see someone's joined us already. Wonderful. That means that you're hearing me. Won't you post down in the chat box over here if you can hear me loud and clear and if everything's working? Do me a big favor and just go down to the chat box and let me know that you can hear me and that you see me live. Great. So yes, I usually just a few minutes, 5 or 10 minutes before I go live, I put an update on Instagram. So those that follow me on Instagram know that I'm going live. And I usually on Sunday morning put out a post letting you know that I'm going to go live so people can join. I see people are joining us. Won't you put your name in the chat box? Let me know you're there. That'll be great. Oh, super. Oh, lovely. Someone says, all great sound and picture. Let me know your name, where you're posting from. Just your first name's fine. I don't need any credential details. Okay. So yes, last week, if you joined us, I spoke about how it was when I first got my first apartment in Lucca in Tuscany and what led up to that, why I came to Italy and what I feel about Italy. And tonight's going to be, there was a lot to cover in that edition, such a lot. But yeah, I want to get back tonight to some of the details of that, what led up to that decision to come to Italy. So I'm going to backtrack just a tiny bit, as I did last week, just to give you background for those who didn't watch last week. I'm going to put the video up here. So maybe if you watch this back later, if you don't join the live, but you watch it back later, you can go watch part 1 first and then watch part 2. So what led to me being here in Italy and what was I doing before Italy? So as I mentioned last week, at the time, thank you for the like that someone's already given. I always try and mention, please like when you come in, otherwise you forget the likes. Tell Facebook that this is worthy content that they might suggest for somebody else looking for stuff about Italy or whatever. And the comments are especially important. So I'd love to hear from you down in the chat box. You can put your name, where you're joining from, like the video when you come in, helps me enormously. But most important, if you're watching it back or later you'd like to leave a comment, that helps the channel enormously. Whether you join the live or you watch it back later, leave me a comment because I really want to know what you think. I got some lovely hearts. How lovely. Okay, so yeah, I had a whole life before Italy, obviously. And tonight I want to just take you back to my 20s. And today I was doing a little, it's autumn here in Italy, and I was getting out some of my warmer clothes because we've had 3 days of nonstop rain, or maybe even 4 days. Maybe it's been 4 days, I think, yes. So oh, lovely, somebody's joined us. Hi, living in Ivrea, Piemonte, moved from Australia. Fritama, Maria, how wonderful. Thanks for joining us. I love to have a fellow Italian. So you came from Australia. Oh, you'll have to leave me a comment later in the comments because I'd love to welcome you and be in touch. Anyway, so yeah, I'm in a cover my 20s. And what prompted this was I was getting out some warmer stuff, as I've mentioned, out of the cupboard, out of my wardrobe, because it's been quite cool and suddenly it's a reality. And this velvet top, it's kind of like a what would you call this? Midnight blue, petrol blue, some people call it. Sort of jumped out, and I haven't worn this for forever. You know, it's one of those things I've kept and kept because it's super comfortable, and it's something blue. It reminds me of the past. So anyway, I was getting stuff out and I was reminiscing a little bit about when I last wore that and what I'd done there, and I started thinking about my 20s, and I'm going to take you there to my 20s. Obviously, I'm not 20 anymore. Thank you for being kind enough to say perhaps I could be, but I'm not. And yeah, tonight I decided let's go back to the 20s. So I'm going to take you back to the 20s. And what really got me going was, have you ever considered how much perfume or a scent will take you straight back to the past? We know that music does this to our human hearts, but perfume does it even more. It's kind of like a signal to the brain, and you're right back there in that time. And this is what happened to me today as I was cleaning out my cupboard, as they say, metaphorically, but really I was getting new clothes out. This was the perfume. I have to hit the sweet spot here because I've got a light so that you can see everything, and it does wash things out. So if you can see, this is a Worth perfume, Je reviens, which literally in French means I will return. This was my perfume when I was in my 20s. It was the first perfume I ever bought, and I used it all through my 20s from Worth. It came in this beautiful original little blue bottle, which is apparently Venetian glass, and it has a sort of indent on it with Worth. Now, can you see how blue that is? It's kind of dark midnight navy blue. I don't know if it's coming out in this light. It's much better in the sunlight, obviously. But this beautiful little bottle of Worth perfume was my pride and joy. The bottle I had then was even smaller. It was half this size. And you can see on there, I heard Worth Paris. So imagine my delight when about 2 years ago, for those of you who don't know, I used to review perfumes live on YouTube, and I had a whole group of people who used to join me, and it was really fun. And I haven't done a perfume review for a while. So this is not a perfume review. It's a reminiscence, but I guess it could be classed as a perfume review. So this Je reviens, I will return perfume. It says parfum, which means it's not eau de toilette, it's real perfume. So it's 30 mils, this little bottle. This beautiful bottle just brought back so many memories. I remember I used to hold it in my hand, this lovely smooth glass, almost like a stone, a silky stone, and just one little smell of this lovely Worth perfume just takes me immediately back. We went out so much in groups. We used to go to nightclubs. In those days, nightclubs, actually, I mean, I'm sounding like this is 100 years ago. It wasn't. In those days, nightclubs had live bands playing. We had some amazing bands that a world-class play at these nightclubs we went to. We always went in a group, even if we were dating somebody, and I was. We would go, 5 of us, 6 of us, whatever. And the singles who weren't dating anybody never felt alone because we all joined in. We all danced together on the dance floor. Sometimes, of course, we dance singularly, but you know what I mean. And so this takes me straight back to that time. And I would remember we'd come out of the nightclub into that cold early morning air of sort of 2 o'clock in the morning, 1 o'clock in the morning. You've been there. And we'd walk home and we'd be all sort of hot and sweaty from the nightclub, and this lovely cool air. And I could always, on my clothes, on my body, could smell Worth. Je reviens. And I wore it for a good, I would say, at least 15 years. So the whole of my 20s and into my early 30s, this was my perfume, Je Revins. And what happened was, then I was a career woman and experimented with a few other perfumes that were going at the time, one of which was Clinique Aromatique, which is very different from this. This has got a beautiful fragrance of soft roses, lily of the valley, a lovely floral perfume, but very haunting and memorable, and it's still gorgeous. Anyway, to cut a long story short, because this is not a perfume review, I couldn't find it. I finished, I think, what was back then my third little bottle of Je Revins. I couldn't find it anywhere. And I ordered it. A friend went to Paris and I ordered it and she came back. She said, I couldn't find the little blue bottle, but I found a longer spray bottle and it's exactly the same. They said it's exactly the same. And so what had happened, I think in the 90s, they reformulated the whole thing and they made a spray bottle. They reduced the strength. I don't know what they did. They changed the formulation. And quite often these perfumes, as we know, completely changed their formulation. Anyway, this bottle that she brought me back, which I was so hungry for because I've been without Worth for a while by then, smelled nothing like the original. It had some kind of shadow of the original, but it had alcohol on the nose and it was harsh and it was the complete opposite of this beautiful, magnificent perfume. Anyway, so I went off Worth and I couldn't find it. Occasionally, I went to Paris a few times, couldn't find it. Friends went to Paris, couldn't find it. I even wrote to Worth and said, you know, I looked in London. Quite often I was in London for work in those days. Couldn't find it. Made in England is written on the bottom of this bottle, believe it or not. Nothing is written in England anymore. It's normally UK. But anyway, isn't that beautiful? That's, yeah, made in England is written there. Well, what happened? So about maybe 2 years ago, when I was reviewing perfumes, I've got a big perfume collection. For those of you who don't know, you can go and have a, if you're a perfume fanatic, you can go and have a look at some of my back catalogue of videos. There's lots of beautiful videos to watch there. And I might have even made a video about this. So I went online and I thought I was looking for some other perfume for somebody who asked me to try and track it down. And I thought, I'm gonna search for this again. I put it in randomly and up came this box. And I knew immediately it was different because the box is very particular. It has this silver Je Revins and this teal color. And what was on the second page was this little blue bottle, this beautiful little blue bottle. So I ordered it and I thought, it's probably not going to be, it's not going to be the original, it's a reformulation, because sometimes if people scream and shout and out, they bring it back and they make a formulation. And imagine my delight and joy when it arrived. I opened it and it was exactly the perfume that I had fallen in love with all those years ago and used so religiously. Isn't that lovely? Yeah, couldn't be more happy. So yes, so that took me back to the 20s, and I had to just show you this little bottle of Worth Je Revins, how this, when I spied it yesterday, just took me back. I remember I used to just love the silky feel of this cool Venetian glass, this midnight blue. And yes, it is exactly the perfume I had as a 20-year-old. Oh, lovely. Please drop down in the chat box. Let me know where you're joining us from. So my 20s. I left home. I grew up in a small town. And I left home, which is quite common for Anglo-Saxon families. It's certainly not common for Italians who are still at home at 33. As the joke goes, you know, Jesus was Italian, and I hope this doesn't offend anybody. It's clean. Jesus was Italian. How do we know, goes the question? Because he was living at home when he was 33. So yeah, that's an old Italian joke. Well, it's a joke about Italy. I'm not sure that it's an Italian joke. Maybe they wouldn't find that amusing. But anyway, yes, I left home at 18, like just about everyone I knew. My eldest sister, we were a big family. My eldest sister got to go and study. She became an accountant. But, you know, I wasn't convinced about university straight away out of school. So I went and did a marketing degree. It was done as a sort of series of modules, and later on I added an MBA to it via London. But long story short, I don't want to bore you with my studies, but I moved to the big city and really worked in various capacities, and eventually drifted into, because I was trained, drifted to international finance and made my career there and worked all over the world. At one stage, was based in South Africa and would go to London at least maybe twice a month sometimes, and also into Europe. So I've always worked, you know, from Africa into Europe, and for the last 22 years, I've been living in Europe. But in my 20s, I always had this yearning for Europe. You know, when we were putting together my website, they asked me for a very short write-up just for the first introduction. And I thought back and I thought, I've always had this intrigue about Europe. And even after living here for 22 years, I still have that same excitement, that same intrigue, that same, I can't wait to see what's around the next corner. I've traveled to every part of Italy, every single part, and I still find amazing things. I still find amazing things, buildings, churches that have beautiful artworks, amazing little courtyards with an angle that you go, and then there's another secret courtyard, and Italy's full of these things, and Milan as a city is full of them, which is why many people who go to Milan really don't know the inside of Milan, and they say, oh, well, you know, I went and saw the Duomo and that was about it. It's fascinating. And this weekend was no exception. So this weekend I was in Novara, which is in the province of Novara, which is in Piemonte, where I live. I live on Lega Maggiore, and Novara is down the road. It is the provincial capital. What does that mean? That means that's where the court is, the legal courts. That's where all the administration for that province. It's a big province. And for example, before I lived in Lake Como, and Como is itself a province with many smaller towns. And it's also a city. Como is a city. Lake Como is a city. But it's also a province. And so it is that I now live in the province of Novara in a town. And Novara has many little towns in it. I happen to live in Arona. And if you want to see what it's like, you can look at some of my videos. I've posted lots of videos of how beautiful my town is. But I went this weekend to Novara. I spent the weekend there, and I'd been to Novara before, and maybe I just hadn't turned down that road, and I was getting a bit lost because I was meeting some people and they were going on to dinner, and I went down all these little streets. It was dark and it just looked so intriguing, and beautiful old buildings, beautifully restored buildings, lovely old palazzos with enormous doors, huge doors. If you saw my post today, I posted the door, one of the doors that, you know, you could drive huge cart horses through, enormous doors with big carriages used to come through them. So dating back before the Romans even. Anyway, I went out to dinner in this gorgeous little restaurant in Novara. I put up a video of it. You can go and have a look. And it was porcini season. And porcini mushrooms in Italy are my favorite thing. And it's the season for them. And I also paired it with some Gattinara Nebbiolo wine from Piemonte, of course. And I had a tagliatelle with sausage, salsiccia, and these porcinis. And it was the most delicious thing. And I'll never tire of Italian food. I've been eating Italian food for 2 decades and more, and never tire of it, because each province, each place does the speciality a little bit differently, a little bit in their own way. They add some touch that makes it different. And some people often say, well, can you give me the recipe for something? Because I used to, cook stuff and do videos on it. I probably get back to that too. People say, can you give me the precise measurement of every little ingredient you put into the recipe? And I couldn't, and I don't. That's not how I cook. And so it is in Italy. Each province might have what looks like the same dish, but slightly different touches. So, for example, carbonara comes from, Rome. And yet, well, around Rome, people argue that it comes from somewhere else. But anyway, Rome made it famous. And yet people argue that it must be done that way and that way. According to the Romans, there's only one way you make carbonara. It must be guanciale, which is the cheek of the pig. And you get that nice fatty dried guanciale. It must be chopped up. You can't make it with bacon. And the only other ingredient, other than the beautiful cheese that goes into it to make it creamy, and that's what makes the cream, is a raw egg, which cooks slightly with the heat of the pasta. You cannot add cream to it. You cannot add anything else. It literally is made. It's a bomb, which is why it's called carbonara. For, it's like a steam train, because carbone is coal. And for the coal workers, it was a meal that really set you up for the day. So those are the ingredients it has. And yet you can have carbonara all over the world. In New York, they love serving up carbonara the real Italian way. And yet it's always different. But in Italy, they're religious about making carbonara the right way. But tagliatelle, you could add some different flavors. So the Piemonte one I had, which is where porcini mushrooms have been made famous in Tuscany and Piemonte, the two regions, but they occur all over Italy, obviously. Anyway, I had this gorgeous meal last night. Hadn't found this little corner of Novara before. It was gorgeous. I window shopped on the way home. It was perfectly safe. People ask me who are wanting to retire in Italy and wanting to retire in particular to my province, what's it like? Is it safe? Can a woman walk around at night? Yes. The answer to all of these questions is yes, yes, and yes. I've done it for all these years. Nothing's ever happened to me. Obviously, there are areas in every city that, you need to be cautious, and perhaps you shouldn't go there late at night. But as a general rule, I use public transport, and I'm exploratory. I go everywhere. I want to see every corner of a town or a city. And from the extreme east, from Venice right over to Liguria, I've been everywhere in the north, the big top part of the boot, to the central part of Italy. I visited tiny villages. I can never get enough. And this comes to the answer. Why did I come to Italy? Why did I choose Italy? I guess because I have always been entranced by these little villages, these small towns, and even big cities that I haven't seen and explored. And there are still places, perhaps in the deep, deep south, like Molise, and places really down in the boot. There's some towns in Puglia I haven't seen properly. I visited Sicily quite a bit. I've covered, the wine regions of Etna and Catania, and also over to the Palermo side, and right up to San Capolovito, which is almost in Africa, so westerly. Yeah, all fascinating, all amazing. And I would go back tomorrow, because when I was in Marsala, I didn't see that little village, and I've always put it in my notebook. I'm going to go back there, and I will. And the same with the Etna volcano side of Sicily, the little towns I've seen, the places I've been, the vineyards I've been to. There's always something that I missed or kept for next time. And that's what's entrancing about Italy. It really is a magnificent place to live out your dreams and find places you love. What brought me originally in those first few weeks that I covered last week, and go watch last week's video, part 1. Again, I will put it up there, was that I was amazed how much art, astounding art, which you would pay a lot of money to see in the museums of the world, in the Netherlands or in France, Paris or New York or anywhere in the world, is all available in Italy, because it's all owned by the Catholic Church. And I've been into churches in obscure towns and seen the most amazing things. For example, I've always been in love with Caravaggio's work. I love the way he depicted the people in their real way. He didn't pretty them up. He made the beggar look like a beggar with rough hands and rough, skin. And the woman, he didn't make them exquisitely pretty, but he made them as they were, with character. Obviously, some of them were exquisitely beautiful, but Caravaggio never shied away from recording history as it was. And I guess I was even in love with Caravaggio before I even came to Italy. But having lived here and having been able to see the works of Caravaggio, which are owned in different places all over Italy, and going to see them, it's made me realize how lucky I am to live in a country where art is everywhere. It's in every town, it's in every village. It might just be a little fresco depiction on a wall somewhere, but art is everywhere and celebrated. And I guess that is the abiding reason why I'm still here. And I was so lucky. I think it must have been about 3-4 years ago in Milan at the Palazzo Reale. They had an extraordinary event, and it was the complete works of Caravaggio. Every piece of work he had done, they shipped it in from all over the world, because Caravaggio's works are owned in London. There are galleries in London that own some of the works from New York. It came from all over the world to the one exhibition in the Royal Palace in Milan. And I got to see it. And I'll never forget, because I asked my neighbor to go with me as a sort of gift, because, he used to look over the garden, and when it was very hot in summer and I had to travel, I would ask him, please just water the roses so they don't die. And so as a gift, I invited him. Anyway, you had to queue for these tickets. It was the last weekend that it was on. And so we left very early, about 30 minutes out of Milan, on the way to Como, and went into Milan and queued for these tickets. I've never stood in a queue so long in my life. I think we arrived at 7:30 into Milan. It took us about 15 minutes to walk down to the Duomo, the cathedral, which is right near the Royal Palace. And we got in the queue. The queue, when we arrived, they had those barricades sort of snaking around, like you see now sometimes in high summer, to get into the Duomo of Milan. When I first came to Milan, there was no queue and there was no security check, but now you have to go, obviously. It's worth it, by the way. It's really worth it. But anyway, similar queue near the palazzo. These barricades were snaking around. We got in the queue. And we had no idea. We had no idea if we'd be there for 20 minutes or whatever. So they had 2 showings in the morning and 2 showings in the afternoon, and that was the end. It was over. Okay. So here we are queuing, and we stood in the queue, met people from all over Italy chatting about how we managed to get our tickets and that we still had to queue even though we had an option for a ticket. But the actual ticket had to be got inside the Palazzo Reale in the door. And will you believe me if I told you that we queued for 4 hours? The queue moved incredibly slowly because let's say they took 10 people at a time and they moved around the rooms. They didn't want a lot of people. Obviously, it was an incredibly valuable exhibition of works of Caravaggio, but maybe they just wanted to give people space to look and pause and think, and you couldn't take any photos, obviously. 4 hours later, we finally made it up, put our feet over the threshold and walked all over this amazing exhibition of Caravaggio in Milan in the Palazzo Reale. I'll never forget it. To see these works, some of which are huge, some of which are the size of a kitchen. They're huge. I mean, they're enormous. The size of a huge door, the size of this credenza behind me, this one picture, and that's a small one. They're enormous, life size, larger than life, some of them, huge, magnificent works. And I was completely spellbound. And I remember saying to myself, this is one of the highlights of my life. I've had many highlights in my life, but this is one of them. And my goodness, how extraordinary. I had seen the 7 wonders of the world by then. I had lived in the heart of Africa. I'd run a safari company. I had taken out game drives. I had swum in the Zambezi River. I had lived in mana pools. I had seen wild animals throughout my childhood and into my adulthood in Africa. I had seen the Victoria Falls, one of the wonders of the world, lived there for a while when my daughter was born. I'd seen a lot in my life. I'd been all over the world. But this exhibition of Caravaggio was something that I will never forget. And I was just spellbound. And the cherry on the top was when we finished, and we had all the time in the world. They only had 2 in the morning, as I mentioned, 2 in the afternoon. Somebody's written something. Nicola del Sud. Buonasera, scusi le intrusioni, ma ne profito di migliorare la mia comprensione. Oh, okay. She says, oh, hi. She's joining us because she'd like to improve her English. Join us. It's lovely. Bene. Yeah, I love it if Italians join us. It makes me happy. I'm Italian. I've become a citizen. You can watch last week and find out how I became a citizen. Anyway, the cherry on the top of this exhibition that we queued for 4 hours to see was that they routed us through La Scala, the opera house, the most famous opera house in the world, because La Scala is right next to Palazzo Reale in Milan. And so when we were finished with Caravaggio's exhibition of all his works in the world, all the works he ever did, all his masterpieces, we went into the back of La Scala, the opera house, and they had the most magnificent exhibition of all the costumes through the years, dating from, I think, the 20s or maybe even before, if I remember correctly, right up to today. All the amazing operas, La Traviata, all of them. Don Giovanni, every single opera there'd ever been in La Scala, some modern ones, all of them, all these costumes, the beautiful costume of the women, the men's costumes, and you could get right up close and personal and touch these and see the accessories. It was amazing. They were on mannequins and so realistic, so amazing. So that took us another 2 hours. We went all through the years, reminiscing of all the things that had happened. It was so extraordinary, and it was such a lovely, delightful thing at the end of this Caravaggio exhibition. And I'll never forget it. It was amazing. And this is what brings me back to Italy time and time again in terms of living here. Sometimes people take things for granted. They say, oh, I live here, but I've never been to Venice. Or I live here and I've never been to Tuscany one day. And I always say, how and why? I mean, I've never had a lot of money. I didn't come here with a lot of money. I don't have a lot of money now. But yet I make a plan all the time to do one new thing a month. I've taken so many people to Venice who have more money than me, who've lived in Italy all their lives, graduated, Italians, graduated from university, always had money, but never went to Venice because they couldn't be bothered. And I've dragged them to Venice and said, you must see it. It may not be here in 50 years' time. I've dragged people to Florence to see the beautiful cathedrals, and I've dragged people all over Italy who really couldn't be bothered. And then they say, well, why didn't I go there years ago? It's so amazing. How come you, the foreigner, have been all over Italy and I haven't? Well, just because it was there and you didn't maybe feel it necessary to go. But I've always had this thing. And in fact, I think sometimes I annoy the hell out of my friends. Because they'll say to me, working 22 years in Milan, people always get out of Milan, get out of the city on the weekends. And they'll say to me, I'll say, what are you going to do this weekend? What have you got planned? It's quite often that I go in and drag them out somewhere to lunch in a new place, or go to the Brera and explore a market, a street market or whatever. But I'll ask them, what are you doing this weekend? And they'll say, oh, niente. So, the famous Italian thing, I have to iron my clothes. You can't possibly spend a whole weekend ironing clothes. I'm proud to tell you, and if you're Italian, you can cut off now, because you'll be embarrassed to know, you'll be horrified to know, I do not own an iron. An iron is I probably did own an iron. Maybe it's still somewhere in the cupboard. I own an ironing board because it came with the house. I do not iron my clothes. I hang them up on a hanger when I wash them. If it's a cardigan or jersey, I put it on the hanger, I stretch it out, I put it outside. In winter, when I can't hang it in the sunshine, I hang it inside. I do not iron my clothes, even the cotton ones. I smooth it out on a hanger and it's fine. So there we are. So Italian women are horrified with me because I don't spend my weekends ironing. For the whole family. I remember when I first met Nicola's mother. You can find out who Nicola was if you go watch last week. We weren't married yet, but I remember one weekend we were still in the early days of dating. Went to his mother's and to pick up his washing and ironing that she was still doing. He'd been married for 20 years already, separated, and then met me, or maybe 20 years was an exaggeration. I think it was about 18. And she was still doing his washing, and I was amazed. And she ironed all his underwear. This is a familiar note for those of you. She ironed all his underwear. His shirts were pristine. The buttons had to. And she used to say to me, please make sure that when he goes to his job in Milan, that all his shirts are perfect. I said, don't worry. I choose his shirt. I choose his tie. I choose his jacket. because she said to me, I don't want him, he's an engineer, I don't want him going to work looking like a tramp. I said, don't worry. I didn't tell her that I discovered very early in the journey that you could take a whole bag of 7 shirts from the week and whatever else. The other washing I did in the washing machine and got hung up. But if you wanted your shirt ironed as good as an Italian mother could, there was a laundry down the road. You took the shirts there, 7 of them, and you picked them up 2 days later, all in their lovely plastic, ironed on the hanger, and put them back in the cupboard. And there he was. He had his 7 shirts for the week, and I'd take out a shirt, put a tie with it, put his jacket with it, and his trousers. And so he always looked smart going to work. So I could look at his mother in the face, who had been ironing his underwear and shirts for years, and say, yes, everything's ironed, everything's perfect, and he's going to work looking like a prince, not like a tramp. I'm still not ironing. I never will. Life is too precious to spend your weekends ironing. Anyway, if you disagree with me, leave me a comment when the video is over, when the live's over. Leave me a comment down there and tell me if you agree with me or you disagree with me about the ironing. Or let me know what you think, whether I'm a slovenly housekeeper. I don't know. Anyway, it works for me. So here we are. Anyway, so Italy, always entrancing, whether it's the food, as I spoke about this weekend, being in Novara and finding a new little restaurant, and once again experiencing something I've eaten many times, but with a slightly different touch according to the chef that made it that evening. A beautiful tagliatelle with porcini mushrooms, which are the king of mushrooms or the queen of mushrooms. And everybody, if you go anywhere in the countryside in this season, you will see cars on the side of the road everywhere. They haven't had an accident. They aren't going into the woods to relieve themselves, or maybe some of them are. Maybe some of them just needed a quick toilet. But they are looking for porcini mushrooms. And the secret hiding places, the best places, are a top secret. And nobody talks about it. So they will just pull over. And some of them have baskets and proper little knives to cut the porcini thing. Some of them don't. Some of them just, on a whim, they'll stop on any countryside road between 2 towns, between a city and another town. They will literally pull over, especially in Piemonte and Tuscany, which has a lot of countryside, undeveloped land. And they will pull over and they'll just disappear into the woods, and you'll see them disappearing into the woods. And out they will come with laden baskets of porcini mushrooms, those big fat things. Oh, how delicious. And if you turn the porcini mushroom over on the back, it's got those lovely sort of yellowy, oh, so delicious, so delicious. Anyway, I had this delicious porcini with sausage, and it was gorgeous, paired with a lovely nebbiolo from Gattinara, and wonderful. But this happens to me all the time, and it happens because I never get tired of experiencing Italian life. And so when people ask me about retiring in Italy, I always say, yes, Italy has its problems, and I've had some very difficult times in Italy. I think not all Italians are friendly, not all Italians are welcoming, just like not all English people are friendly and welcoming. But I've got some wonderful Italian friends, and I've had wonderful people that I've met in my life, but I've also met some stinkers, and I've also been treated with discrimination and even bullying as a teacher, as a head English teacher. But when I look at all of it, the thing that keeps me here and the thing that entrances me is that you can't get tired of it. There's always something to see. There's always something to experience. And when I do get tired, and maybe I go and visit France for a weekend or whatever, and I come back, something new happens, something that I think I've seen before, and it's not going to surprises me. For example, last week I just walked down from my apartment down to the lake and watched all the little white boats. It was a perfect late summer day, just going into autumn. Pristine day, like champagne, and all the white boats and some of the lovely yachts with their spinnakers just drifting by with this beautiful countryside. And I thought, it's astoundingly beautiful, and it literally sometimes moves me to tears. So then I come home and I think, okay, well, I don't know what I'm complaining about because everything's fine. But I have to say, being a YouTuber, that I sometimes get odd comments and I sometimes do get some hate. I try and ignore it. But, you know, there is a YouTuber who has recently, well, I would say in the last 2 years, been working with an Italian attorney on dual citizenship for Americans who want Italian citizenship. Now, I'm going to cover this briefly because people often ask me about retiring in Italy, and I always say it's a wonderful place to retire. It's not a wonderful place to work, unfortunately, as a foreigner, because it's very difficult to find work, number one, and you will need a visa unless you have Italian citizenship or you are married to an Italian. So, Italian citizenship, jus sanguinis, as it's called. So, there is this law, and it's always been around. So, you probably know, if you know anything about Italian history, that in the 30s, in the 40s, maybe in the 20s too, in the 40s, the 50s, the 60s, the 70s, Italy went through very hard times. People were starving. There wasn't enough food. After the war, before the war, the world wars, masses of Italians went to America, not only to America, to Australia, to South Africa, to wherever, Argentina. And they made a new life there. Okay, their memories of Italy were sad and miserable, and they couldn't imagine, they couldn't run away fast enough. They got on the first boat and they left. And so they arrived in America, and some of them wanted to put Italy behind them immediately and these memories, and they either married an American, but that wasn't so normal, or they married another Italian family who also ran away from Italy to America, so they kept it in the family. They married another Italian from another family, obviously. And let's say that happened, I don't know, in the first 3 or 4 years they were away, and then they decided they wanted to start a family. If those children were born, so the first generation born in America, if those children were born while these Italian parents were still Italian, in other words, they did not go and become an American citizen. They did not naturalize as an American citizen. So let's say for the first 4 or 5 years, they were Italians, they married another Italian, and they had children. Those children, the next generation, they are entitled to have Italian citizenship. But, and here comes the kicker, here comes the difficult part that makes the subject so controversial and so full of emotion and drama whenever I talk about it, and I have to talk about it because people ask me. If they naturalized as Americans, or if they married an American, the women, they lost the Italian right to citizenship. So they couldn't pass it on. Okay? They became Americans. And in becoming Americans, they lost their right. And the same applies to whether they went to England or Australia or everywhere else. If they naturalized there, they lost their Italian citizenship. But people just imagined they had no interest in coming back to Italy. There was nothing for them in Italy. They ran away from Italy. But then the generations moved on, and those children born in America got married, possibly to an American, possibly to an Italian, and they had their children. But because the first person in the line was born in America while the ancestor was still Italian, this jus sanguinis presided. And so let's fast forward a whole lot of years, and now we're talking about the grandkids. They're in love with Italy. Italy is a different place. They come here on their holidays. The rich, the not so rich, the poor, they all come to Italy. They all come to experience their roots or just to enjoy Italy like all of us do, to eat the pizza, pasta, and mandolino. And they go to Sorrento and the Amalfi Coast and they fall in love, and they go to Napoli. Oh, gosh. And they hear all the terrible stories their grandparents who didn't want to talk about Napoli and didn't want to talk what was going on and all of that, and all the brainwashing about the mafia that they've heard all their lives. And they fall in love with it, and they say, I want to live here. I want to be here. I want my roots back. I want to get an Italian passport. Okay, great. And so starts this generational thing, which has happened in the last, certainly since I've been living here. This wasn't the case. When I came here, I never heard about all of this going on. I would say in the last 10 to 15 years, it's happened. Anyway, and so all of these Americans are not only Americans, I'm picking on the Americans because they were the biggest group, but Australians, people in England, people in South Africa, Argentina, they applied to become dual citizens of the country where they are, America, and also Italy. And some of them were successful. It's a long process. Some people say you definitely need an immigration lawyer. Some people manage to do it themselves because all the birth certificates, marriage certificates, there can't be any missing link. Every single birth and marriage certificate has to be got to trace right back to the person applying for the registration by blood. And many people were successful, and it was generally kept on the down low. They did it through a lawyer, the rich did it, but it was wonderful because the European Union happened. And long after these people had fled to America, the European Union happened, and Italy is part of the European Union, and they wanted a European Union passport, and they were entitled to it. And some of them got it, and more people have applied and got it. And every day there's a video on YouTube about how to apply, what you should do, blah, blah, blah. And there are lots of nasty comments, and Italians feel quite strongly about this. But at the end of the day, this is the law, and that's how it is. But there are lots of unfortunate people that find out once they go to the lawyer, or once they do some investigation, or once they talk to me, or once they talk to somebody else helping people with retirement overseas, is that they find out that their parent had already become American or Australian or whatever before they were born, before that first American was born. And therefore, they are not entitled. The line is cut and they're not entitled. And the consulate has to explain to them, sorry, no. You do not have jus sanguinis. You do not have a blood tie with Italy. You are unable to have dual citizenship. And it's quite bitter. And these people get very angry and bitter, and they go on the internet and cause a lot of ruckus. Okay, but these are the facts, and I'm just telling you. So there has been an increased discussion about this, But what's gone even further is that what's become quite nasty on the internet with this subject is there's lots of people who have, some of them have channels on YouTube about this, have then decided, once they've come to Italy and seen Italy and how it works today in present times, that they don't want to stay here. They don't like the tax rules. They don't like the fact that Italians don't speak English very well. They don't like the fact that, you know, they probably have to learn Italian to run their business here. I had to. And so they decide to go and live in Portugal, which is a European Union country. They have a European Union passport. They don't want to live in Italy. They thought they wanted to live in Italy. They thought it was lovely, but they couldn't understand why their ancestors left because, oh, it's gorgeous, blah, 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 blah. But for some reason, they don't like it when they come here and they're not on holiday. You know that holiday and living is two different things. And so they decide, oh, I've got a European Union passport now, I'm going to go to Portugal. And I can understand why Italians get upset. I can understand it. As I told you last week in last week's video, which I'll put up there, when people criticize Italy now, I have to defend Italy. It's my country. I'm a citizen. I speak fluent Italian. I'm a dual citizen. I was British, and I'll always have these two citizenships. In fact, I've got 3 citizenships. I've also got South African from my father. So my point is that the internet is a strange thing. It's been a wonderful thing because you can find out anything and you can do anything. And it's helped lots of people to claim their dual citizenship. And if you would like to claim your dual citizenship, you can do it. Just put the name of your consulate in or put dual citizenship Italian. It'll bring up a whole lot of sites and you can either do it yourself, or if you want to give me a free call on my website, I can tell you, you know, if you need to search documents or come to Italy to search documents, I can tell you legal people that we work with or whatever. Or if you want to buy a house or whatever, that's all. Or you can leave me a comment and email me. My email's always in the description box. And down in the description box, I will put some of the other videos that you could perhaps go and watch. Please subscribe if you haven't. It makes such a difference to the channel. And then you can hit the bell and you'll know when I'm on live. Because often people say to me, I didn't know you were coming on live. I missed you. Well, if you subscribe, and it helps the channel a lot if you subscribe. Only about 65% of you are subscribed to watch me regularly. This is normal. Even the very famous YouTubers have the same rates. But just subscribe. It's free. Come on. It's going to help me. And please like the video. I can see there's a whole bunch of you watching. Go and like the video right now. You can just hit the like button. Go on. Anyway, who has introduced themselves? Introduce yourself in the chat box. I want to know where you're joining me from. And thank you for joining this evening. And I hope it's been interesting for you. My story is long, and so I had to break it up into parts. And I hope I've represented a little bit of Italy and what you might enjoy about Italy. And I hope you're going to join us again. If you're brand new here, my name's Amanda. I live in Italy, and I've been enabling people to visit Italy, come to Italy, buy a house in Italy, or live in Italy for a long time. And yeah, and I hope you're going to join us again. So I think that usually I try to keep the live to about an hour because people don't have a bunch of time. And if they watch this back later and don't join the live, you can watch it back. It's available immediately. Go and leave me a comment. Please leave me a comment. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about dual citizenship in Italy and people who get the dual citizenship and then decide they don't want to live in Italy. It's okay. No judgment from me. It's up to them. Anyway, I'm glad you joined tonight. I welcome all of you to come visit and see all the amazing things about Italy. And yeah, and I hope I represented the light and the dark. But yeah, there's so much to see, and I'm still learning every day new things, new parts of Italy I haven't seen, even though I've traveled north, south, east, west. And I hope you enjoyed me reminiscing with the beautiful perfume that I wore as a 20-year-old. If you came in halfway, you should go back and watch this video again when it's published, and you'll see me talking about this beautiful perfume that I wore all through my 20s. Worth Gervins. I'll be back. I will return. So I'll be back on the next video next Sunday, same time, 9 o'clock. Join the live. Let me know. Drop your name down in the chat box, and I'll see you soon. Thank you for the likes. Thank you, everybody who liked the video. Hi, and thanks for joining. I'm going to leave you a little message here, and let me know in your comments what you want me to do next. Greetings from Moscow. How stunning. Nicola del Sud. Oh, what a lovely name, del Sud. I've got Italians tonight. That's rather lovely. Anyway, let me know. Go in the comments. Let me know what you think about the dual citizenship, dual sanguinis. Let me know. Anyway, from me and my beautiful perfume, bye-bye, beautiful people. See you next week. Go watch. You can watch. I've got a whole playlist of videos that you can watch about beautiful Italy, or me, or what I'm doing in Italy. So go and watch, and don't forget to subscribe, like the video. Take care. See you next week. Bye for now. From Amanda. Bye. 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 Bye.